Well, it's great to see you, Nick. He's managed to get the cup of tea in before me today, which all credit to you, young man. Far more
Oh,
organised.
I can't start a day without a cup of tea.
I know, I know. So yeah, no, I sort of ran out of time this morning. So yeah, no, I find these conversations we have, Nick, a really good check on thinking, and it's also a slightly horrific insight in terms of how quickly things are moving in the wrong
Yeah.
direction.
Mm.
So I think it's for me, I like it's good discipline. It's a bit like doing a weekly leadership review. Whilst people moan and think it's a waste of time, it stops you to think in in our busy days, whatever we're doing, and just reflect what's happened and what's changed. Otherwise, it sort of melds into you know I don't know, it just sort of a feeling of just things are going the wrong direction without really reflecting too much. So
Yeah.
I value these times. So thanks for joining me on this. So I thought I think the agenda's pretty straightforward, which is what's escalated, what's changed, and since we last spoke, let's reflect on that, and then let's just try and talk about what we would suggest or what we are doing and what we may suggest to other people
Mm.
that may help them to cope with these situations. Because I think you and I come from completely different backgrounds, which I really value, but also we've got a lot of experience of handling difficult situations. You grassroots sort of, you know, hands-on, child,
Mm.
with your charity work, which is just extraordinary. Me from a company turnaround perspective, handling some really awful situations. So I really, and plus also, of course, other things. So over to you. So what do you think's changed, Nick, and in the first instance since we last spoke?
I think over the last 2 months, I think it's about 2 months since we've chatted. I
Yeah,
think the big surprising change for me is the amount of people now talking about violence,
yeah,
talking about revolution, talking about overthrowing the state, talking about stringing up our politicians. I've had acquaintances of mine and one or two long term friends of mine who have said to me, and this is really, really scary now, they've said to me, they're looking forward to the violence.
yeah,
And when I've asked them why, because innocent people are always hurt, there'll always be destruction. Once it happens, there's no controlling it. It goes in any direction it wishes to go into. Why are you, as a sensible person, looking forward to this? And the answers shocked me the first time I heard it, but then I got it off several other people as well, roughly the same answer. And the answer is, I'm tired, Nick. I'm
yeah,
tired. I've been beaten down. My country's dying. I'm told I have to feel ashamed of being English, being British. My culture is denigrated. I'm demonized. People are invading my country. I've had enough. I've
yeah,
tried the ballot box. I've tried protest. I've tried talking about things, and none of it works. We have to get to violence. And if violence doesn't work, at least I tried.
yeah,
And we're heading for an extremely volatile and dangerous position in this country. I can
yeah,
smell, I mean, I come from a council estate. I can smell violence minutes
yeah,
before it happens. I
yeah,
can sense and smell violence in the air.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, I think you're right. I think as human beings, we've got this natural instinct, haven't we, to feel fear, which is not
Mm.
particularly rational, but it's a basically sort of biological process that
It keeps us alive. That's how our
yeah,
ancestors survived,
yeah,
by being oversensitive to danger. And
yeah,
so, if you are oversensitive to danger and you hear a twig snap in the woods at night,
yeah,
it could be a wolf. It could be it could be nothing. If you
yeah,
climb a tree to avoid the wolf, and it turns out it wasn't a wolf, you've lost nothing. But
yeah,
if you ignore that branch being broken and it is a wolf, you die. That's the end of you passing your genes on. That's why we're super sensitive to potential danger, because if we're wrong, it doesn't matter. We've survived anyway. But if it
yeah,
turns out to be right, at least we've been forewarned and forearmed.
yeah. And I think the other thing I've noticed with that is that you become hyper aware to things that you shouldn't necessarily be hyper aware to. So you become, we've obviously got a problem with immigration, and I've got two very attractive daughters, and you know, you look out for them, and but how do you look out for them, Nick? How do you look out for them? You're obviously um, putting yourself in a position where you're looking for the outlying people that obviously don't fit into our society. They're very obvious that
Mm,
you can just tell. I think that's the other thing. You can tell people who obviously don't have our interests at heart. They
mm,
just don't care. Sometimes the worst people I've seen are just people laughing at you. Have you come across that? Immigrants just laughing at you. Just
yeah.
completely. Which and you, I've dealt like you. I've dealt with a lot of really difficult situations from a different perspective. But I just, you become hyper aware, and I think that fuels the lack of trust.
Mm.
But how much do you in your? I think there's just one question in terms of where we're getting our information from. Um, uh, how it, take your own personal situation. Do you have kids, or how is it? How is it in Manchester or wherever you live? I mean, what's it like when you walk out your door? What does your wife, your partner, whatever,
Mm.
how's it manifesting itself yourself?
So Manchester city centre is horrendous.
Right,
We have homeless migrants in tents everywhere.
right,
We have gangs of foreigners everywhere, young men drinking, taking drugs, causing mayhem. We have YouTubers in Manchester who go to the city centre to record what's going on. One of them, called Charlie Veach, has to take 2 or 3 personal bodyguards. I'm not talking about 2 or 3 friends. He
yeah,
pays professional bodyguards to go with him because if he turns the camera on the wrong person walking down the street, he's been assaulted many times. That's how bad Manchester city centre is now,
yeah,
mainly down to mass migration.
mm,
Also, I mean, it's not just mass migration. We have British people, drug addicts in the city centre as well. They've been failed by all our services.
yeah,
It's a combination of things. And when you just said then you've got 2 daughters, how do you protect them? Well, the obvious answer is you protect them the way the people who have moved to this country protect them. You ensure your daughters don't leave the house. And when they do, you put them in a burqa. But is that the way we want to live in this country?
yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, um, yes, that's interesting. I mean, I live in a very different part of the world, but I can see the trends. I mean, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at this from a slightly different perspective, and where I'm coming from, it almost concerns me that people are not even aware of this stuff, Nick. Um, where I live, I mean, I live in the middle of, the Surrey Hills,
Mm,
basically. And I speak to a lot of people. I have a lot of provocative conversations with people to try and see where their heads are at, you know, push them out of their limits. But a lot of people are just sort of burying their heads in the sand. But it only becomes evident when you actually go to London or you go, and it becomes very obvious what the threat is.
yeah.
I
But
think,
it's more than London now. So that was correct 10 years ago. It was the major cities and
yeah,
some of the northern towns were where the problem was at. It's been creeping everywhere now for the last
I know,
decade. It may not have hit your Surrey Hills yet, but
yeah,
in Greater Manchester, one of the richest parts of Greater Manchester is called Altrincham.
yeah, I
Um,
know that place.
yeah,
Yeah,
I can't afford to live in Altrincham.
no, it's where the
Um,
footballers live, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. And they've last year they opened up. The government took over one of the big hotels in Altrincham,
Yeah,
300 rooms. It's where all the posh people have their weddings,
yeah,
and they've took over that. 300 single fighting age male immigrants are now in Altrincham,
I know.
and the people of Altrincham have gone crazy. But do you know what? In that place in Altrincham, they voted in 3 Green councillors and a
Yeah,
Labour MP who
I
all
know.
want this crap.
I know.
So now people are going, I'm not voting Greens again. I'm not voting Labour again. So people don't realise what's happening until it affects them personally.
Yeah,
So we've always thought the cities were dangerous places, and they've always been dangerous places compared to
yeah,
hamlets.
yeah,
There's parts of Manchester city centre called Deansgate. In Victorian times, there's articles in the Manchester Evening News from Victorian times saying the police have not dedicated them, announced that parts of Deansgate are no-go areas.
yeah.
And that was
I know.
before mass immigration. So cities have
Yeah,
always had problems, but they're
yeah,
so much worse now.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's right. I mean, I look at this. I mean, I'll just share some stuff from I'm looking at it really from the perspective of, um, company turnaround, and the psychological mechanism. So I'll just comment on a bit of that sort of stuff, and I'd appreciate your thoughts. I mean, the basic terror mechanism is victim, scapegoat, um, and terror. So the mechanism with that is, if you take Axel Ruda Cabana,
Mm,
he's the victim. You know, he's a minority. HR lawyers love those sorts of
mm,
people. The scapegoat is then the far right, got nothing to do with it. Just like, and then you know, um, he's labelled as a Welsh choir boy. You've got lies and propaganda in there, and then you've got the terror, which is people speaking up, the whistleblowers, who get clobbered and labelled as far right and locked up.
mm,
You know, all kinds. So that's the and that is the basic mechanism of any any government, tyrannical, be it left, right, doesn't bloody matter. They all do that. And the problem with victim centric ideology is it always leads to escalating violence. So
mm,
when you've got these guys, in fact, Nick Tony Tenconi picked up on this beautifully when he went over. He used the word entitled. They're coming home. They're being told by the NGOs that that you're entitled to this. You've been treated badly.
yeah,
We've bombed your country, and that is just the most dangerous. So the most dangerous start to people who, frankly, don't give a damn anyway. And with that psychology, the problem is it doesn't take too much more of that psychology to really tip these people over the edge. So a couple of and Khan is the absolute worst at this. He should be, in my view, extradited because his language is so inflammatory around that. And a little bit of that, if that gets into their heads, that's then fuels more of this victim centric. And the problem with victims, they're totally unaccountable, Nick.
mm,
They always blame other people. So Starmer's constantly bloody talking about black holes and avoiding questions. So
mm.
that's really concerns me.
Let me jump in there. I'd say it's worse than that. I agree with everything you said then about the victims,
Yeah,
but it's worse than that. First of all, the vast majority of these people are of low IQ,
yes, yeah,
because they come from countries of low IQ.
yeah,
That's not racist.
no,
That's fact. No education. I mean, 50% of migrants leaving Africa can't even read and write in their own language.
yes,
So that's how poorly educated and that's how low their IQ is. But
yeah.
then on top of that, there is, and I've got a new book out, by the way. It's called Anglophobia,
Oh wow,
a
okay.
price worth paying to be English. It came out a couple of days ago.
Oh cool.
Um, and one of the chapters is dedicated to this. And what the conclusion I've come to is the part of this is jealousy and envy.
Yeah,
If you can imagine, you come from the third world. The
yeah,
best your ancestors ever did was build mud huts.
yes,
You're now in the West. You're born in the West or you've emigrated to the West, and you look at Western civilization, you go, wow,
yeah,
wow.
exactly. Yeah,
It's either my ancestors failed me by being so poor and not being able to achieve what these white devils have achieved,
yeah,
or these white devils cheated.
yeah,
Which
exactly.
one am I going to believe? Either we're not good enough compared to white people, or white people are evil and cheat. Do you know what?
Yeah,
I'm picking the evil and cheating.
yeah,
So they resent us for being successful as well.
yeah.
It's more than
Well,
just entitlement.
no, you're right. Well, that's all part of the victim. That's
Mm.
all self-reinforcing victimhood, isn't it, Nick? And
Yeah.
the problem with victimhood is it justifies any level of escalating violence.
Yep.
It's self-fueled, obviously, because the more the trust breaks down, the more people feel like victims.
Mm.
And there's no accountability with victimhood. It's all about blame. So they justify, and third-party victimhood is even worse, right? So
Yeah.
if people like these people are taking third-party victimhood on behalf of the Palestinians, there's no effing accountability with that whatsoever. The rubber doesn't even hit the road. It's just the most peculiar sort of horror. I think the other thing with this is that you can't speak up against it. And it's very interesting. It affects quite smart people. So the person that shafted Andrew Bridgen in Parliament was
Mm.
Penny Mordaunt, and Penny Mordaunt's a bright woman. So it's not doesn't just affect people. I'd also say that the actions that the Starmer government are taking to maintain this mass psychosis are escalating, and they all fit with the Marxist ideology of
Mm.
the victim, scapegoat, terror. But the other part of this is also propaganda and escalating unbelievable situations. So, do you know what's happening on the 19th of July? Do you know what's happening on the 19th of July?
No, tell me.
It's time. the WHO treaty has been signed.
Right.
Now that is the ultimate abdication of responsibility and the ultimate threat. Incarceration, forced vaccine mandates. This is the start of hell. And it's and there's also a trial going on in Holland at the moment, which is Nuremberg 2, basically. Are you aware of that?
No.
Yes, it's amazing, that this isn't clear. This isn't. You really have to look for this bloody stuff, but it's just not publicised anywhere. There's a great guy called Jim Ferguson who speaks about this stuff. But basically, Nuremberg was created because of the Nazis doing experiments on people, which
Mm.
is exactly what the COVID vaccine is all about. It's an experiment, totally unproven. In fact, the only evidence I've come across of what the mRNA vaccine does is it hijacks your hippocampus. The Chinese discovered that in 2017. But so there's the Nuremberg 2 trial is taking place, and Gates, this is actually pulling together Baller, the head of whatever the bloody pharmaceutical company is, and others. Gates is so arrogant, he hasn't even appointed a lawyer. Just
Mm.
unbelievable, off the planet. Sort of abdication, because of course before the pandemic took place, before they even launched the vaccines, they got the agreement signed off to give them all indemnity. Just
Yeah.
the whole thing is just,
Yeah.
as well as trashing ivermectin and calling it horse shit, whatever they called it to try and discard that. I think the other thing psychologically is we're facing, and I've come across this a lot, is that the task is getting too difficult to face, Nick.
Yeah.
So what you've just described, it's much easier, and we all do this. It's a psychological flaw to, if we're faced with something really difficult, we'll normalize it. We'll say things like, "Well, we'll be okay. No, X, Y, Z will clear the migrants out, or they'll start. The Islamists will start behaving themselves." Whatever the psychology is, or if you take the specifics of the advanced party, the sort of psychology there is we can wait till 2029.
Mm.
Wait for what exactly? So it's very easy to normalize this stuff, and it's really tragic to see what's going on in Parliament. And I think this is, the rape gang inquiry that Rupert Lowe organised. There's only about two or three or very few MPs that turned up, which is truly horrendous. So when you look at Parliament, they really are. In my analysis, they really are indoctrinated.
Oh
They're
yeah.
unable. They're on a track, and they're unable to go left or right. Otherwise, you get Penny Mordaunt or anybody will just step out of line and call you an
Mm.
anti-Semite or a racist or something. And that is this absolute vice-like grip, as well as the escalating threat of Islamophobia type, which is a Muslim. And you understand, one of the things I do, really important to understand, is, do you know what the source of the Islamophobia? Do you know what is the term Islamophobia came from?
It came from it was something like the Islamic Brotherhood or something like
Yeah,
that.
Muslim
Yeah,
Brotherhood. Yeah,
the Muslim Brotherhood. They were, so what I wrote about this in my previous book. They saw the power of the word racism,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
said we need a word like that to shut people up when we're being criticized. We need
exactly.
something like homophobia to shut people up if we're a gay
Yeah,
person. And
yes,
they invented a word and they called it Islamophobia.
yeah,
And they've used it as a weapon ever since to shut people up from criticizing Islam.
yeah, and that's actually been obviously systemized into the government. So it's a bit like Black Lives Matter. The psychology that, when you understand, that's actually a negative generalization, Nick. And all negative. Do you know what the characteristic of all negative generalizations is?
No.
They're always false, always false.
Mm.
Right? Because nothing is ever always negative. But actually, some things can be always positive, oddly enough. But it's like Black Lives Matter. It's an exclusive term. Islamophobia is just the same, very corrupt. Um, so, and I think the other thing which is picking up is that we've talked a bit about what it is to be British. I
Mm.
think you know I think the whole of our political system has relied on Christianity,
Mm.
which is like a pre-program inside of people that then they naturally sort of behave properly. They open doors for women, that you're polite to people, all that sort of stuff. And what we've got is an Islamic invasion of Parliament, and you can see Turkey left, right, and centre. You've got Khan, you've got Sultana. I like
Mm.
I like Neil Hamilton's bits of humour when he talks about Sultana. He says, how many sultanas does it take to make a fruitcake? I thought that was quite amusing. But we really have got fruitcakey
Mm,
activity like this cousin marriage stuff. I mean, this stuff really doesn't fit, and we need to be respectful to other people's beliefs, but at the same time, there's got to be a definition of what's right or wrong. But this is something we've assumed that people would never happen. But the
mm,
minute you throw away Christianity and you with the DIE stuff, and you let the open the door to this stuff, you really are in a you're not playing by the Marquis of Queensberry rules. I mean, Takia is something that is baked into people. They will lie to protect their just like the Muslim Brotherhood on
yeah,
Islamophobia. So I think we're facing that sort of thing. I think the other thing is that people are sort of assuming that government is going to deliver something or the civil service.
yeah,
And
no,
when you look at it, I mean, you've got a lot of change experience. I mean, when I look at this, I think what I've learned since you and I've spoken, is actually government is getting more entrenched and more
mm,
corrupt rather than less. You can see this in terms of what they've voted for, like the abortion bill, the suicide thing.
mm,
No one turning up to Rupert Lowe's proper, and I think this is truly disturbing. But I think the civil service with the Islamic network and stuff is really unbelievably corrupt because you've got a lot of effort to silence people. A lot of course, and of course, they run all of the immigration programs and HR lawyers and all that sort of stuff. So, this whole expecting that type of vehicle, and when you look at it, I mean, I just if I put my company turnaround hat on, when you look at that whole system, the biggest problem you've got, take away all that idea, all the corruption, but the biggest problem they've got is they've got far too many people. And you actually, the starting point is to get rid of most of them, even
yeah,
before you've got this corruption. So you really want a civil service, which is probably going back to sort of 20,000 people, maybe
mm,
maximum, rather than the 2 million or whatever we've got now, because as a starting point, and then you can start fixing it. So the chance of actually fixing these unbelievably corrupt civil servant things in any, you've got to shut them down. I mean, Dominic Cummings talks about this, create a parallel organization. I've done this before, you may probably
mm,
done it, where you actually take bits out and you drop them into something new and you rebuild something new and you just drop the rest of the crap. It's called this it's basic restructuring.
yeah.
But you've probably got your own version, but that's the level of, and I think the political parties are vastly underestimating that. um
You can't go into a huge organization, any organization that's failing, and expect the same people with the same bad habits, with the same poor attitude, with the same poor work ethic, with the same ideologies to suddenly start doing better.
I know.
And even if you take good people into it, they're then infected by the old ways and the old ideology and the
Yes.
moaning and the backstabbing and the we know better than politics. You have to cull it. You have to take out so many people and
Yeah.
then bring new people in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, you can't change it.
No, you've got to change the leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think the other thing I've noticed as well, something I've realized relatively recently over the last few days, again, coming back to, company turnaround, it's very common for leaders to become corrupt when things get tough.
Mm.
But what we're witnessing, this grassroots corruption, right? People like you're talking about in Manchester, but also some of the business I run, I ship quite a lot of product. And the amount of people that claim they haven't received stuff, Nick, has gone through the roof. The
Yeah.
amount of fraud that's taking place, the amount of people who are probably delivering parcels who are not delivering parcels, are sort of sticking them under the hedge and collecting them later, or whatever. And I was thinking about that because the thing about a company turnaround, companies go bust before that happens, Nick, because um, you know, when that happens, you've got an organization which has gone, financially will just collapse completely.
Mm.
So but of course, this thing cannot collapse completely because people are trapped in the bloody thing. It's not a company. This
Yeah.
whole, one of the things that always occurred to me was that, if the UK PLC was a company, you'd shut it down. It'd be insolvent, and
Yeah.
it would naturally sort of have to sort its crap out because it's trading to the detriment of creditors. I mean, look at the deficit;
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
breaking all the company
Mm.
law.
But
But there's nothing
they have a special trick that commercial businesses don't have. Commercial businesses, when they're failing, can't go and rob their customers of more
exactly.
money.
Yeah.
The government can. The government goes to its customers, which is its
Yeah.
citizens,
Yeah.
and increase taxes and robs us even more to keep
Totally.
the failing show on the road.
Yeah.
And that's the huge difference. Eventually, the citizens have no more money and it
I
all
know.
eventually will collapse. But
Yeah.
it can go on for decades and decades and decades, as we have seen.
Yeah.
But talking about the Muslim MPs and government and Islamophobia, what's happened is we're a tolerant country.
Yeah.
We've become so tolerant where we now tolerate people who are intolerant of us.
Yes.
That is that is something we need to stop. We need to stop tolerating people who are intolerant, and that's a paradox. But
Yeah.
but I get that. But that's what we need to do. There's so many people in our country who who don't have the country's best interests at heart. They may have their tiny population voters in at heart, like the Pakistani community or the Bangladeshi community or the Ethiopian community or the gay community or the queer community. But
Yeah.
that's not what politicians should be. Politicians always should have the country's well-being at heart, and we don't. We're splitting into tribes, splitting into
Yeah.
little fiefdoms where MPs stand up in Parliament and campaign to keep cousin marriage, or so that's not a great example. A better example is MPs in Parliament campaigning for the British government to help fund an airport in Pakistan.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a better example
Yes,
because
you're right.
these people don't see themselves as British. They
No.
see themselves as Pakistanis living in Britain,
Yeah.
taking advantage of Britain and wanting the best for their homeland. Now, there's nothing wrong in that. I would just like British people to do that, to put their homeland first, to put their people first at the expense of other people.
Yeah.
That's not racism. There's nothing wrong in that. That's what we've been designed to do, to put our tribe first, to make sure our tribe survives. And we're not doing that. And
I know.
unless you're willing to fight for your civilization, you're going to have to accept barbarism.
I know. Well, totally. And actually, all of that stuff is also riddled with victimhood. I mean, Islam only became successful, going back when Muhammad claimed victimhood, and you can see this now in the rape gangs because what happens is that white women get blamed for walking around with no clothes on. Therefore, it's their fault. Therefore, they're scum. Therefore, this, that, and the other. And again, the men are actually the victims, and they've got no choice. And this is actually, some of the psychology of the victimhood, which is just, and that happens on quite a few different fronts. So,
Yeah. And it's not
um,
just the men who do the raping, it's their wives, it's their mothers, it's their
I know
children all turn around and go,
it's
my
systemic.
father did nothing wrong.
I know.
It's white women's fault. You're only persecuting my father, my husband, my son for raping because you're racist, because even the female family members
Yeah.
agree with what's going on by their male family counterparts. It's the
I know.
absolute. That's when I realized we had a huge problem with the rape
I know.
gangs.
Yeah.
It wasn't the raping because
No.
men have always raped women. It's horrendous. We need to hang them. That's my
Yeah.
stance.
Yeah.
But that wasn't when I realized we had a problem. It was when their communities and their family members would not call out their relatives.
Yeah, no,
If
I think it's the cover up. It's the systemic cover up of this because if the law was working and the police were working as they should, this should get fixed and it should never grow. But it's the cover up, systemic cover up that's the problem with this.
That's one
Honestly,
part. Yeah. So the state cover up is a huge problem. But I realized we had a problem with immigration when family members
no,
would
that's
not.
what I mean. So that's all part
Yeah.
of the cover up. That's all
Yeah.
part. I totally agree in it.
Yeah.
But I see
So
that
if you think, if you,
that's a cultural cover up because they think it's okay.
yeah, exactly. So if you had a brother or a cousin
Yeah,
and they found guilty of raping 20 girls,
yeah,
you would probably never speak to that cousin again. You
no,
would have called that cousin out. You would, if it was my cousin, I'd be campaigning for him to be hung,
yeah,
but not in that community because it's tribal, it's clan based. We stick together because it's us against the world. We're not
yeah,
British, we're not English, we don't want to be English and British. We are who we are, and we're fighting against the world. It's our clan against everybody else. That's
yeah.
when I realized we've got a huge problem.
I know, and if you think about that, I mean, I think the other example of that is actually is Manchester airport people. The
Mm.
thing that strikes me about that is they have a complete disregard for any UK law whatsoever.
Mm,
And I think we're getting to that stage where people are beginning to think, actually, the whole thing, we want it, whatever. And so, then you think about the institutions we've got, which are relatively corrupt with this sort of stuff, with DIE and stuff. Then there's no chance that that's going to be fixed by that. And if if you think about how you fix, I always think, where's the common denominator here? There are common denominators actually, because Christianity and Islam are both Abrahamic faiths,
mm,
and they do believe in the Old Testament. And I'll tell you one thing that's quite interesting. You were talking about, I think there's a lot of, I think this DI stuff is actually a lot to do with the corrupted um, view of compassion. Right now, compassion in a Christian context is interesting because um, Jesus, right, loves people, but he doesn't love the sin, Nick, right?
mm,
And if you can differentiate between the two, say actually, but Jesus is not tolerant of sin, right?
mm.
And so in this compassion, we're tolerating sin. Fundamental, because what we're talking about is a lot of sin. So I think we need to have that separation from person from, and then deal with deal with this stuff and make it clear. But we're going to set the stall at. But this is the crux of society. And this is, if you don't have a common denominator like that, and we haven't got, and obviously there's no political. Well, Rupert Lowe actually is, Nick Tenconi is, but
Mm.
unless we can live this, unless we can enact this, unless we can execute this through our, education, and the rest of it, we're basically screwed.
Yeah.
Um, so
I think a lot of this I write about this in my book. I think one of the starting points of our problem in the West is Adolf Hitler. We think we beat Adolf Hitler in 1949, but he left a legacy that's destroying us today. And it's not Nazism, it's not fascism, it's his ghost. We saw what Nazi Germany did with the Holocaust and how they treated so many people. We saw the concentration camps, we saw the piles of bodies. And we looked at Germany and we went, they're just like us. They're a
yeah,
Western country. Our whole family has German blood in their veins. They're a
yeah,
manufacturing powerhouse. They're not Africans that we can go, oh, what do you expect from Africans? They're not Cambodian. What do you expect from Cambodians? They're not even from Yugoslavia. Well, they may be European, but they're not Western European. We're the best people of the world. And we saw what Hitler did. And since then, everything the West has done and America's done is all about not, well, all about trying not to repeat what Hitler did. We're scared stiff of ending up being Germans because if it could happen to them, it may happen to us. That's why we tolerate everybody. That's why we tolerate and had acceptance of homosexuality. That's why we have mass immigration
yeah,
because the alternative is we might send people to gas chambers and we become, and that's hence why the left are always using Hitler and Nazi Germany as insults. You fascist, you Nazi,
yeah,
because psychologically we've been damaged by Nazi Germany, and
yeah,
and we're always trying not to turn into Nazi Germany, and we need to reject that
yeah,
because we never would turn into Nazi Germany.
yeah. I mean, I think, well, Nazi Germany, sort of, in my simple view, is came to light because the Germans basically got such a kicking after the First World War. They lost their purpose, they lost their pride. And some lunatic came along who was extremely charismatic and talked a lot
A,
of,
a socialist lunatic.
yeah, National Socialist,
Yeah,
same as Starmer, National Socialist.
yeah,
In fact, that's actually what the Nazi Party was, actually a left wing party. It's not,
yeah,
um, but he deployed all of the same techniques in terms of national being national strategy, setting out dead, being absolutely autocratic, as well as the victim centric ideology and scapegoat terror stuff. Um, and the disturbing thing about this, and I think this is that in claiming victimhood, there's actually virtue. That's the hideous thing. So, and most people will go along with the masses, Nick. This is really tragic. And the
yeah.
people who actually undo this sort of true terror are individuals, Solzhenitsyn type people. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why, and that one of the reasons why Rupert Lowe's strategy is flawed. Uh, because if we just talk a bit about the sort of respective um, political alternatives. And I'd just share my thoughts, and you'd be really interested to know what you think. I think Advance, they talk about there's extreme naivety in Advance. We've got till 2029. They're very technocratic. Ben Habib talks a lot about the EHCR, but in fact, we could easily stick some bloody boats on the channel and stop this stuff. There is no appetite to do that. There's no big picture change experience in that team either, so they haven't got the experience of doing that. And because they can't deliver, the gap is widening. So if you're talking about utopia, and the world's falling to pieces in Manchester town centre, and you
Yeah.
can't even get a life of bread without getting threatened, then of course, your utopia becomes pretty irrelevant to most people. I think the Rupert Lowe thing is flawed as well, tragically, because people are very screwed up at the moment, Nick. I think because there are so many difficult things to face, people are actually normalizing this stuff. Victimhood is a very comfortable place to be. There's an awful lot of people that believe the Hamas propaganda and Israel are this, that, and the other. Notwithstanding if it's right or wrong, but people are very easy to manipulate, and that's a very comfortable place to be, to go with the masses. And there's very few people like you and I actually stick a head above the parapet, and actually go against the narrative. Let's face it. How many people like you and I, Nick? How many?
A couple of dozen.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
couple of
So
dozen in the whole country. A couple of dozen.
yeah, so let's give ourselves a pat on the back for a second. But no, I think there's massive minority, and actually, this is where the Solzhenitsyn thing comes in, because in my simple view, that it's people like Solzhenitsyn who stick to the truth,
Mm.
um, and eventually, right, wins through. But then there becomes a movement around the truth because everything else falls to pieces, because a non-truthful society just doesn't work. And that's why I think the Rupert Lowe expectation is flawed, because the only way to get to that is to get to action. Because I was
Mm.
thinking about this in a company turnaround perspective. How do I create credibility, Nick, when things are in this sort of shit? And I've done this a lot of times. I get to action immediately. So, and get into action, that puts me in a leadership position. I know how to make things happen, and then people follow. Oddly enough, and they won't agree
Yeah.
with everything I say, but they will follow, because things will start working again, and that actually they can dump all their crap on me, and I'll show them how to do things
Yeah.
relatively correctly. So I think the Rupert Lowe thing, the movement thing, is flawed. We need to get to action. I think as well, his plan's far too tiny. I think if we had an effective plan for the rape gangs and the boats, probably that might work. But the budget for these things is bloody enormous. So
Yeah.
it's like there's a naivety with that.
I think what we really need in this country is, and this is what reform should have been, but they're nowhere near this. What reform should have been was was a grand coalition. Nigel Farage should have come along and went, right, we are going to change the UK. It's not going to be the Nigel Farage show. It's going to be, we're going to
Yeah,
put country first. And
yeah,
what we're going to do is we're going to get into power and we're going to press the reset button,
yeah,
because our country, our systems have been infected by viruses. We need
yeah,
to turn it off and we need to turn it on again and go back to how it used to work. And
yeah,
to achieve that, I'm going to need 3 dozen extremely intelligent people. And
yeah,
I'm going to bring all these small parties on board. So we're going to get the Heritage Party on board. And the
yeah,
leader of the Heritage Party, he's going to be in charge of culture for this
yes,
new grand coalition. Nick
yeah,
Tanconi is going to be involved. He's going to be in charge of immigration. We're going to,
yeah,
and then we're going to get some business people on board. And that's what Trump has done in this new administration.
yeah,
He's brought on board so many people, and these people don't have to agree with each other. So the leader has to go,
I
you
agree.
are an expert in immigration. You can
Yeah,
disagree with us publicly about other things. It'd be great if you don't,
yeah,
but you're going to concentrate on that. And at the
exactly.
election, Nick Tanconi, you're running our immigration. At the general election, you can stand as UKIP, but then
Yeah,
even when you win your seat, you're in the government as a grand coalition, and nobody else will stand against you.
yeah,
And it's about sharing power, sharing success, sharing resources, and
totally.
focusing on the country. But at the
Yeah,
moment, all we have, especially in reform, is all they want is to replace Labour and the Tories. And
yeah,
they just want to do a slightly better version of what they're doing. We
No.
don't need a slightly better version of what they're doing. We need
No.
we need a reset button being
Yeah, you're
pressed,
totally right.
and a grand coalition is the way. We need a new leader. We need a leader to. I don't know who that's going to be, but a leader to come through and develop and build this grand coalition.
Totally agree. It's funny you say that because I've written a business plan for I wrote a business plan for the Advance Party, which was rejected, interest enough. But it's exactly that to get to. I describe those people as guerrillas, Nick. Bit provocative, but
Mm,
they're not. I mean, they're the antithesis of the existing political system. I think
yeah,
I totally agree that that's an action orientated set of people. I think Dominic Cummings needs to be in that list. He
mm,
understands what's involved. But the interesting challenge with that is that they need to be protected. They need to be upskilled. They need to work together. That because the whole thing needs to be an effective delivery vehicle.
yeah,
Um, and people will then, in the same way that you and I, the way we lead in terms of trying to make things happen, do the right thing, people will follow. I think that's what the Restore Britain, what you've just described is, oddly enough, it's funny the way we reached the same conclusion. What I describe is what the Restore Britain thing should do to unify. But I think the other thing is that, and you'll notice this, and I test this a lot quite provocatively, is that when things get tough, Nick, there's a test for leadership is when things get tough,
mm,
right? What do? You look at Farage, he's completely failed. I think, and look at the Zia thing, completely corrupt. The whole thing has just had it. And that will not, I think it's just dead in the water. I don't think it's even worth the time of day. I think Advance is too technocratic, got none of the delivery experience you've just described, which I think we both agree on, which is interesting. Um, but I think the Rupert, that's the plan. That plan needs to be executed from now. That then provides a vehicle for people to vent their fury and prevent violence occurring,
mm,
Nick, because people will then feel, even though it's slightly half-assed, a bit like when I'm leading or you're leading, people think, well, Tom is this, that, the other, but at least he's bloody doing something.
yeah,
In fact, it's funny actually. I remember turning around a construction business, and construction businesses are truly scary, Nick. I remember being jammed in a room once, and this guy who had been in the business for hundreds of years, um, and it's actually I had to have lots of board meetings because with these guys I had to we're basically talking about restructuring, getting rid of
mm,
people, everything that they didn't want to hear. And I was jammed in this. I was managing director. I was jammed in this boardroom, right, with these bloody huge
yeah,
builders, right, pretty scary, having to deliver a very difficult message to them. And one of them said, "About time," right? And I thought, shit, what? What's about time? I thought that's like going to trigger up some
mm,
sort of violent unrest, but actually, he said about time that because the things I was doing, it's about time someone did that. And I thought, thank God for that. That's
mm,
quite encouraging. So people will follow like that. I think I think Nick Tanconi, I think he's got the Christian wisdom. He's got um, the balls to set out the
mm,
stall. He's got a very clear idea of who um, who's in and who's out
yeah,
of this equation because you do need that degree of clarity because and you need to execute on that. He's got that, but I think what he doesn't have is the leadership experience. He comes and I think he's a bit his focus is activism, which is all very well, but there has to be a degree of maturity
yeah.
of leadership of
And that's why we need a dream team coalition,
yeah,
because we're not going to find one person with all the traits who's got
no,
everything we need, because
totally,
those people don't exist,
yeah,
hence why we need the dream team, where we have a couple of dozen people who have got experience in different fields and different traits, and and until we get away from thinking one person's going to be our savior, and we need to move away from that because our problems are too big.
I think
One
you're right.
person isn't good enough to fix this country. They don't exist.
No, but if you think about if you actually got that team together, Nick, just think about it, right? Compared with all of the rubbish we've got at the moment, the completely broken civil service, you know,
Look at Labour's front bench. Jesus, if you want to create the opposite of the Labour front bench, that's what we need, because
I know,
that's just pure incompetence.
no, but I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything that's worth fixing in the political realm. And I thought about this a lot, and I'm not despondent. But if you think about, if you put that team of guerrillas in place, that would be the solution from which to build everything else around it.
Yeah,
And hopefully, it might end up parking its ass on the green benches somewhere.
Mm.
So, but I'll tell you what, something else that's occurred to me as well is that in all of this crap, frankly, um, Ed, Ed, that lunatic
Yeah.
bloody liberal, he actually is growing in popularity because he actually scratches the itch of those green lunatics, EDI type people in the most peculiar sort of way. So he, oddly enough, represents that lot. And,
Mm.
it talks absolute rubbish. I mean, just the most dangerously, trampoline. He's like some sort of pixie that should be bouncing on a trampoline at a children's party, isn't he? With some stupid bloody hat on. But he actually uh, scratches that itch. So yeah, really
But,
interesting.
but I don't think it matters who replaces Starmer becomes leader. I don't think it matters who replaces Kemi Badenoch. Those two parties are jam packed with different versions of the same individual,
Yeah,
and all of them will go down the same path. They may pretend they're different. They may tweak something very, very, very slightly and get some press about it, but they're all on the same path. They're all heading to the same destination.
I know. But if you look at them, if you're going to recruit the team, they're the last people you'd start with, aren't they? I mean, there's a few. There's
And
a few.
let me jump in, and that's why Reform are annoying me so much. Reform keep recruiting former people of the blob that have destroyed the country. Why
Yeah,
do they keep taking on former Tory ministers and former Tory chairmen and stuff like that? It's like, what are you? These are the people who killed the country.
yeah.
You should not want anyone who served in Labour or Tories at a high level. You shouldn't want any of those people. Some of their councillors, yes, I get that, but no one who served in government. You want none of them because they're the problem, and that's the big mistake Reform are making. How are they going to be different when they keep recruiting the same people who have destroyed the country in the first place?
Well, I think no. Well, I think I think you explained that also earlier, Nick. That it's part of what I said. I think as well. When things get tough, how do people behave? And things are relatively tough for them,
Yeah,
and they haven't got the skills to cope with it. But I think that the other part of it is you can see their colours, so they're not facing the challenge. And of course, in not facing the challenge, the easiest way is to get on the monorail,
exactly.
uniparty route. Because if you stick your head out, you're going to get shafted because you're
Yeah,
surrounded by people who will um, do everything to shaft you, and that's quite a. If you are in that place, you see, I'm not. I mean, how did that manifest itself for me? I offered to work with it when reform first started. I recognised this, and people, and I got involved locally, but I refused to actually do the usual sort of handing out leaflets type stuff because I said it's a waste of time.
mm,
I identified that this thing was broken. The governance was appalling. Zia Yusuf really at the psychology, the Farage psychology, the whole thing and Rupert was there at the time, and I recognised this dynamic and it was going to go nowhere. But I offered my to support that to solve that because that's what I do.
mm.
That's what the Winning Thinking program does, and I just knew that without that I was going to. So I would not get involved in that even at that early stage. So I think if we do create the right thing, then the right people are going to get involved as well. People like because you had a dabble with reform, didn't you? You were quite
I
not
was a
so
member
long
for
ago.
6 months
Not so
and
long
then
ago.
resigned.
You said it was the sort of best of the bad job. We don't
Mm,
have time. What I don't know. You said something like that. I don't think we've got time to do the best of the bad job. We've got to get it right first time now. Um,
mm.
because even doing things slightly wrong, even if we're compromising, I think the challenge, and this is another really tough challenge, and this is the reason why I'm speaking quite frankly, because I think this is what we've got to do, Nick. It's about doing the right thing. It's about us actually enacting and saying things that we believe are true, or as true as true can be, or at least maybe a bit provocative to promote another discussion,
Yeah.
rather than to sort of cover. Otherwise, we become part of the cover up ourselves.
We
Um,
need to stop living by lies because
yeah,
that's what we've been doing for decades.
yeah,
We get lied to. We know they're lying. They know we know they're lying. And they know that we know that they know that we know they're lying. And we pretend to believe it and we go along with it. That needs to end.
yeah,
We need the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. We always need the truth, and we need to start being adults, and we need to start working towards the truth. All this lying and believing nonsense all
Yeah,
has to end.
yeah, yeah. And I think I tell you one thing that's encouraging. I was going to. I think that's a really good summary. I think as well, what I'd say, which is encouraging from a company turnaround perspective, Nick, when this happens, okay, uh, and the something's on the point of collapse, what people will actually respond to is people like you and I that attempt to speak the truth, right? Really value the truth. And there's an opportunity to be really bold. I mean, really bold, and say, look, this is what we're going to do. X, Y, Z. Doesn't matter how unpopular that is, which is more of a Nick Tenconi type position.
Mm,
And then you execute on that, and people will follow.
mm.
And that's a unique privilege that you have when things get really bad, and people will go along with that because they've lost it.
Yeah.
And rather than follow, you know, the the compelling purpose of the Islamic party, which is compelling. They've got a compelling purpose. All credit to them.
Mm.
It may destroy the UK, but it's compelling. But if you can create a good, compelling purpose, a Rupert Lowe, Nick Buckley, Nick Tenconi, Nick. It's quite a few Nicks actually, aren't
Yeah.
there? Not many Toms, but I think if you can do that, then people will follow, and I think we are getting to that stage. So, and I think actually you're it's very interesting, and I hate, and I'm never looking for this, but it's very interesting. What you've just described in terms of that unifying bunch of gorillas
Mm.
is absolutely the solution to provide that leadership and delivery and courage and conviction and integrity. But it's amazing, even when you get those people together. And I've had conversations with some great people at Andrew Bridge and Howard Cox, Ben Habib, Rupert Lowe. The challenge with it is, Nick, is when things get tough, when you start talking about difficult things, even Tommy Robinson,
Mm.
people haven't got the skills to do it.
Mm.
So it's all very well, right? And also people like Andrew Bridges is a brilliant, brilliant man. But again, he's under a lot of pressure, right? So, and I don't know what Dominic Cummings is up to. He's a bit of a mystery to me. And then you've got Nick Tenconi, who's a really passionate man. But I know we need to find a new level of humility, Nick, and love for each other and time for each other and imperfection to actually run this damn thing. Um, and that's again it does full circle to what my winning thinking program does, which so I'm oddly slightly encouraged, but um, and I think in the meantime, what's really important for people, anybody that's listened to this, if we've got this far, then congratulations if you listened to this far.
Yeah.
But I think what's really important for people's well-being and also mental health is to do whatever they think is right. And that might not be what we think is right. That
Mm.
might be some sort of green electric vehicle type stuff that you and I completely disagree with. But as long as they think that's right and they're not being, forced into it, then for goodness sake, speak out. But then we've got to develop also the skills to communicate as well, Nick, because if you take the ability for to speak with the far left or even people who've got common denominators like you and I, when we get involved in battle, to actually deliver this stuff, that's the test of our skills. We need to work together because it's one thing unifying, but that team of guerrillas actually need to work together because it's not the sum individual parts; it's the sum total of those parts. It's going to be more than that simple maths of
Yeah.
adding them up, if you know what I mean. So
Let's end on this. For people watching this, and this has been a long interview. For people watching this, and they're thinking, right, what am I going to do? The starting point is this. How about you start loving your country?
yeah,
How about you start putting your country first?
mm,
That's the starting point. Everything else will come out of that. Love your country and want the best for your country. That's the starting point.
yeah, yeah. No, thanks, Nick. That's good. Look, let's leave it there. I think, yeah. So I think that's been a very interesting discussion. I think,
Yeah, I've enjoyed that.
yeah. So thanks for your time, Nick, and let's check our sanity in the next month or so.
Yeah.
See what happens next. Good job. See you later.
See you soon. Bye bye.